Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is May 12th, 2025, and we're looking at Bitcoin as always here on the daily. We are going to talk about the weekly close. We're going to take a look at ETH and Sol and some important areas over there, and we're going to talk about what to expect or what to look out for, not necessarily what to expect, but what to look out for in some of the economic data that's going to be coming out tomorrow. And Bitcoin went up, nearly tagged some of the very important areas that we've previously spoken about. You know, the 101 to 104 above there, looking around 106 to the 108, and then the all-time high. And you can see that Bitcoin did try to push up to this green area here. So I've got some color coding here just to make things real easy. Bitcoin is in between some overhead resistance and some downside areas of, well, prior resistance that if tested we want to see as support. And this is pretty easy. I actually left this unmarked for a reason here. Let's go ahead and actually fix this real quick. But essentially, Bitcoin down to $100,000 or anywhere under there, I would start to look for, price to kind of test down into around the $96,000 to $97,000 area. I would want to see Bitcoin at least attempt to try to flip that into support on the daily after it was prior resistance, if it is going to test this area. Anywhere below there locally, by the way, we will start to look back to the last higher low on the daily here, essentially around that 93.5 area, which is, of course, the last higher low on a closing basis for the weekly. Now, overhead, even though there was a bit of a doji here and a fairly widespread in terms of dispersion of returns on price, so pretty volatile daily candle on the Monday session, price just has a pretty good chance to go up as long as it's trading above around $100,000 to $101,000. We'll look at the normal support and resistance chart that I typically show off here, but in just a moment. But we've got the overhead area of interest here at that 106, and you can just take the highs in general there as well if you like. You can just mark out this high that we swung, but in reality, it's all just swings up here above 106 where we had the double top on a close. And of course, we got the higher high that was also the inverted doji that set this higher low, which was a little bit of a warning sign back here. We talked about this last week. Now, in between these areas, roughly above about 100 to 101, we're looking still to that overhead resistance at that 106 to the 109,360 area as fair game. Now, if we do start to see the same area to the downside loss, that weekly at 93.5 to around $93,000, we're looking right back to this 92K test, which is this higher low over here at a close. And that's, that whole zone is fair game between the inflection point between the lows and the highs over here, all the way down to that $87 or so thousand. So what was the close open here? Looking really 87.5. Anywhere below there, of course, I'd be looking right back to 85, 86. So we have talked about that before as well. But I wanted to make it very simple in terms of kind of the basics of today's analysis as I mark all the wrong candles here. So it's really, the yellow zone on retests if we do get a deeper correction here. But as long as it's above about 100 to 101, we're looking, as upside still available. And to support that, we have not seen any in-trend bearish divergence just yet. So we of course have some historical bearish divergences, but in-trend is the most powerful. This is still an uptrend. And the last higher low is right there off the weekly at 93.5 or so. To be fair, it's a little bit under 93.5. What is that actual low? It's 93,363. So, that it's still an uptrend from here. So upside is still on the table for the bulls here, despite painting a high up here. And pullbacks 97 to 100K, fair game. just as the upside there, 106 to the 109. Now again, above the all-time high here, we're going to get into Bollinger Band setup here. The next big area that I'd be looking for locally is that 1.168. At about, I would still give it room. Whole numbers like 115 are going to be probably sold in this area. Anywhere above, about 110 here. I'd kind of look, I'll be honest, I'd be looking at 110 to 112. And then, 115, 116 fair game. From there, we're looking around 120 to 121. And then, of course, I showed on Friday the big confluence with the longer term time frames. And note this one if you hadn't seen Friday's video, the 128,000 by that 1414 is fair game up there if we do start to see price break out above the highs here and go on a run. But we're going to look at that confluence in just a moment. Let's look at a few other things here. So we talked about trend. Let's go ahead and look at volatility. We talked about support and resistance, obviously, in terms of the zones here of interest. And we can see that right up top here, we basically have the upper second to the upper third bracketing the all-time high zone here between the close and the all-time high. Upper second's right there at 105.5 or so, just skating across the bottom there of the 106 region, and the upper third is right there, right at the all-time high, so 109.360 or so. Anywhere above there, I would look for, price to go on a bit of a run here. See that Bitcoin is holding on to the upper first. If it loses it, right down into the zone here, essentially 97 to the $100,000 area is fair game by the basis. If it drops it, we're looking where? Right back to the last higher low, right around the weekly at 93.5. Then, of course, right below there, we've got the 92 essentially to that lower second as a big area of interest, right around 89 to 90 to around 92 inside of this area that is, it's pretty much the prior lows. You can call it, this zone you'll see in just a second for the main chart is going to be 88.7 to like $92,000 for the bottom side of the range here. Obviously, taking into account this higher low, which is right off the 1.168 from the macro fib from last cycle, which, by the way, is 16.8, not 618, which is much further up. But, something just to be aware of in that regard. Let's look at momentum here. We do have some momentum divergence populating here, which, right now is just corrective and can chop around and stay in the overbought zone or tease the edge of the bullish control zone here for regular momentum. This is close over close price momentum, not a Stochastic RSI, which is essentially velocity of RSI. In this case, 104.5, we'll turn this back up. And this can stay up here for a while, especially on a regular Stoch. So, if it starts falling aggressively, then we're probably looking at Bitcoin testing some of the, yellow zone, maybe a little bit below wick fishing or something. But we got to be aware that this can bullishly reset in this area pretty easily as long as Bitcoin is trading above that 100 to 101. And when looking at, the normal support and resistance charts that I show you, let's go ahead and just kind of get this out of here real quick. And pull up the local support and resistance areas of interest. Here we go. You can see that, price upon breaking into this zone smacked right up against the macro 1272 fib extension from the prior cycle, high to low. And of course, this is log scale fibs, as I always use log. And log isn't going to make that much of a difference versus the linear, but when you're measuring macro, it should be log. And in this case, we see that we got the close above 104, and we did push up to try and get into this all-time high zone here. Now, I do have it a little stunted here at the 108, 4. But realistically, any trips in there, it's just wicks up here. So, the all-time high and higher is fair game, right? But you can see if we do start to lose the upper first and that 101, I would still give it a chance around $100,000. Could it even just kind of want to touch off of like 99.5 or so on a swing? Sure. But any closes below $100,000, if we haven't already headed down to the basis band here, right around that 97 or so, to the 98 high here. It's very highly likely that that's where things would head. And then anywhere below the 95 to $96,000, bottom side of this consolidation, essentially before the move down. Then I'd be looking for that 93.5 by that lower first to get tagged. Anywhere below there, we're looking right back to our big zone here, 92 to 88.7. So this higher low swing off the 1.168 to the next close. And then, of course, we had all wicks in there before the closes and then the breakdown. So, this is fairly easy to read price action right now. And one of the things that I keep getting asked is like, does this move still have juice left? Yes, and in fact, it does still have juice left. Let me go ahead and move this real quick. 71 over 69, nice, is still showing signs of life in terms of volatility expansion as it relates to the bands. And as long as Bitcoin is trading closing above the upper first, it can stay and hang on the highs and even try to push higher. This was a nice little daily correction. We have, of course, economic data that's coming out tomorrow for CPI. And the last month over month read, by the way, was inflation was flat. So we'll see kind of if that remains the same. We're going to be getting year over year and month over month CPI data. So that's your inflation data. Some of the metrics are coming in, in the previous month, kind of indicating that we could kind of go either way, but I think it's probably going to be right around where projections have been estimating. And in this case, we've got about 2.4% year over year. Core inflation, they're forecasting an uptick of about 0.2%. For core inflation, previous was 0.1%, and inflation rate was they're projecting 0.3%. Last month, it actually came in under at negative 0.1%. And then, of course, core inflation year over year, they're estimating at 2.8%. So I think we're probably going to be fairly consistent with that. And excuse me, I'm starting to catch a sickness and illness. I don't know what. But, I'm not really, I'm not looking for big changes. We've gone over some of the data for those that follow this, I guess, X feed. Primarily is where most of the traffic is, and kind of followed along with some of the videos. If you're just watching on YouTube, I've discussed some of the numbers and where they're at as we were ending last month, including GDP, but in terms of spending and income and inflation, like covered all of that towards the end of last month. It could go either way, but I'm not looking for any outliers in this data, not any major outliers in this data. Coming into this particular read. Now, we will also have PPI, so Producer Price Index, month over month. That's going to be on the 15th. So we're looking at, what is that going to be, Thursday? That's going to be Thursday, yeah. So just something to keep in mind. I don't think any of that's going to be like earth-shattering news for the markets. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bigger correction, by the way, considering all the good news and the big rally up 42% on Bitcoin. A deeper correction kind of probably needed, but we did get that really nice consolidation. So again, just watch it carefully, pay attention to the levels that I just spoke about. We're going to get back to the weeklies, but let's go ahead and take a look at ETH, because there is a big thing going on here that I want to compare between like Ethereum, Solana, and Bitcoin. But Ethereum just came up to try to take out the bottom side of this range, and it did close in there and then got rejected right around, what was the high here? The high ended up coming in at 26.25 here. So essentially this is the consolidation before the breakdown. So this is where 95K was on Bitcoin, and we even see the retest that came in after the breakdown. Now, of course, Bitcoin's looks a little bit different. So if we look at Bitcoin over here, we see that this was the $95,000 region, and then we had that retest before making new lower lows, and then of course finding the bottom side of this range as a rejection, and then our third big drive down. So we had basically 1, 2, 3 big drives, reversal up, And so far we've got one, two, pretty steady staircase drives up. But it's remains to be seen if we got juice left here. But of course, it is definitely something worth paying attention to, as I just noted a little bit earlier, for more upside potential. But Ethereum has yet to regain that consolidation prior to the breakdown. So we do need to see that. We did get the closes above 25,550, and that is a positive sign. So a pullback and a cool down on Ethereum is not out of the ordinary here. And in fact, it can come down and sit on the upper first and be pretty safe around 2,300. And you might recall that is the big area. And of course, we got 2320 to around 2340 to 50 down here below. Anywhere below there, you see that we have the basis band above the prior consolidation here, right around $2,000 to 2,100, and that's this that rejection right there. Now, if we go ahead and turn on some of the support and resistance stuff that we've talked about in the past, this is it's right in the thick of it, right? So if we do get a retest down here, the upper first is right there at that big weekly. 2,100 to 2,300 is what you want to see hold if you're bullish. Especially on weeklies, I would like to see that hold up. Doesn't mean that it can't wick fish down on a weekly basis, which does mean price comes down a little bit towards that basis. And this last consolidation area, just under $2,000. But on any kind of a correction, I do want to see this 21 to 2,300 from a weekly standpoint remain as support, back above the 26, 25. Now in terms of trend, we're looking to that 27 to 3K up here, so it would be fair game. Again, this is kind of looking like 2480 to keep this turned up, and it's sliding under there right now. No big bearish divergences just yet for this current trend, but it did hit some critical reads up here. I would expect that if things keep pushing up, it will build some bearish divergence. So just be aware. This move still has some juice, although we are, maxing out BWP. So a little bit of a correction. See how it holds up around 23 to 21 if it gets there, and then if it can take out 27 and start pushing towards 3K and possibly even above, that would start to look good. Then we can start looking at some of the closes above there. 3,100 to essentially this breakdown right here, high that was a rejection at 3,440 or so. That would start to look very good for Ethereum. I think if we see that, Bitcoin dominance has got to really start legging down on the daily a little bit more aggressively than it has been. Solana, same kind of deal as Ethereum. You see that the big breakdown candles, the consolidation breakdown didn't even get retested. So this was a big area. I guess the bottom side of the zone, actually. You know what? Good thing I scrolled back a little bit more because I was about to be wrong. The bottom side of the consolidation, but the actual consolidation prior to the breakdown, it still needs to be recovered. So I would say, the entire zone up here is something to pay attention to. As like three big main points in this zone overhead. And I know it's going to look like a mess when I turn on the rest of the chart here, but in terms of kind of the area overhead that I would kind of exercise caution below, even though we did not get closes above the retest of the breakdown. We are looking at some significant areas of interest in terms of resistance overhead between 180, 189 all the way up to 209 for this local consolidation. So need to see consistent closes above there to continue to push up. Now cooking off the lows looks good. Let's go ahead and turn on the support and resistance areas of interest and take a look and see where. Yeah, okay, that's that big weekly in there. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's the 209 weekly. Or no, I'm sorry. This is down here. So this is just what I just put in there because I'm a crazy person. My apologies. Big zone. So we have to start identifying some of the key levels in here. I'll clean this chart up for for Solana because it's kind of a mess, and I do apologize. I can read it, but it makes for terrible viewing. But basically losing 169 by the upper first there, even around 166, it could dip below safely. If it starts closing below there, could it hang on to some of the swings down here? Sure, around 160. Top side of this 157 by the basis band, fair game. Anywhere below there, it's going to start testing back towards that 145 to 150, and you got to watch out for this 141 low at that point, and then we don't, that would be bad. But I'd essentially say on any kind of loss of 169, pay very close attention to 152 to the high here at 157. Anywhere below there, start looking right towards the 150 to 147 region, and then right back to the higher low kind of equal low structure here on the dailies, which is coming in roughly around 140 to the last higher low swing at 141. So that is what I'm going to pay very close attention to if this does correct further from here. And then, of course, just overhead, I want to see 180 to that essentially 190 by the upper third to start pushing up towards 200 to 209 up there. And come back to it later. In fact, maybe this is the weekly. Oh, this is the weekly high. Yeah, so it is 200 to 209. That's right. So I was correct. This is an inter-weekly. But from the daily standpoint, 190, 200, 210, basically above there. So pay very, very close attention to that. Now let's get into the weeklies and wrap this thing up. We've got for Bitcoin, the weekly close was nice and strong, met all of the criteria that we talked about. We did not get did we? Did we get a closing? Nope, just shy. So 104,447 was closed slightly below for the weekly, but we did get a nice weekly close above this area here, or the next weekly close area of interest is at that 102.5, which is, well, guess what? Right where Bitcoin is kind of settling in right now, at least for the daily at the moment, between the two weekly closes. So essentially, we got the test up to the next weekly. We even got a swing of it now. If things start to turn around here, by the way, you're going to hear double top, triple top, so on and so forth. You're going to hear that. But please remember that this is a downtrend break as it stands right now. And from, statistically, when you get a downtrend break, you still have to entertain a trend reversal setup. Higher lows, equal low setup on the way back down. Otherwise, it takes out the lows, especially if you see closes below 78,370. Then that would be danger that it's going to go and take out or try to take out that 74,420.69 low. And then this whole thing would be a deviation. And even on a trend reversal setup, we have to exercise caution, right? So it does pay to be defensive in an area like this. So we've got the downtrend, right? And then when we get something like this, you look for higher low, equal low setup from here, right? On the trend break. So this is just an example, just like last week. If this is going to be the high, then it's the high. Then we still look for higher low, equal low setup. And I'm not saying that this is where you'd find a higher low or equal low. I'm literally just specking this out for example's sake. So there would be let's say a higher low. We need to see a higher high structure develop from there. Right, and then that or equal low on a close, or swing with a close that comes in higher. That would be fine as well, or acceptable on the bullish side. But we need to be aware of another type of setup that could occur off of any kind of a higher low. Whether it's we put in the high this week or next week or the week after, or it doesn't matter how high it is. Either. We still have to be aware of the possibility that it would come down and do something like this, where it would come up and make a lower high, right? And then take out the higher low, which would be a bearish scenario. So that is something to be aware of. And, right now, enjoy the rally. I hope that people are taking profits on the way up and continue to do so if price continues to push higher. And prepare for the next weekly highs that might come in. Even if this thing goes on a rip, right, and starts running, let's say it hits the $128,000 region, which is the next major fib, by the way. And for those that may not recall, this is the $128,000 is a macro fib extension at the 1414. Just so happens to line up with a local fib extension. Let's say that this thing just wants to cook and run. These two fib extensions are confluent at the 1414, and it's very rare that you get them lining up nearly that perfectly. But right around $128,000 would be a local fib extension for that pole and a macro. So it is something to understand, is pretty important if we do see things break out. But even then, we have to be aware of the setup, because this is still just a trend break. So even if it by chance like just cooked all the way to the top side, that's still just a trend break. We need to see higher low, equal low structure from there, right? Not saying that that's what I'm thinking is going to happen, but that is something to be aware of. All right, so we still need to we still need to confirm or set up a trend reversal. So don't FOMO into this. You still have plenty of time for trade setups to develop. Trust me. And that's going to be it for the Bitcoin on the weekly. There's not too much else to say there. Continuation above 104.5. You can see that it's just testing the highs. So if we see that on the daily, then I'd be expecting to test the highs and higher. We can even take the prior consolidation as some local areas of interest overhead. 110 to 112 by the 2 spot. And then you can see even the 272 and the 2414 kind of bracketing around 124, 125 to depending on your chart, by the way, because there was some deeper wicks on some of the other charts, but ballpark basically 125 to 130,000. So there is some confluences on the setups. More relevant, maybe for what's going on here, I would just be using local fibs for this here and make every GAN and Elliott Wave trader cry. And I do apologize. But basically, if any of the GAN traders in the watching this would be like, yeah, 95 or 90,200 is great, and even better above the 618 at 94.5. So, and just so happens 786 is right where the upper first is, and as I do typically note, as long as the daily is closing above about 100,000, 100,500 or so, it's playing in the zone between the upper first and upper second in terms of volatility, and that's essentially 100,400 and the upper second, which is right around the highs. Of course, right around this high at that 108, 3 to 400. Any closes above there, especially on the weekly, we're looking for a price replace band, probably to the upper third, $115,000 to $116,000. Fair game. Weekly for Ethereum. This is the big thing with Ethereum. So let's go ahead and actually turn off support and resistance for the weekly here and actually kind of explain this one a little bit more. This is from a different time frame. I probably should talk about the macro compression, but Ethereum's in a macro compression. Maybe we'll talk about it towards the end of the month. The last weekly high in that actually put in a weekly closing high is right around 28.55. We need to see closes above there. But just like everything else, that would be the trend break on the weekly. This is still just another lower high if it puts in a high here. And then we still need to see higher low, equal low structure for this, and then take out this high. Or go take out 28.55 here, and then put in higher low, equal low structure to be bullish. But this is still a bearish setup for Ethereum. And let's see. Well, let's look. We got a bunch of momentum on Ethereum's side here. So it has room to reset even on higher lows above 1481. So, basically 1480 to 1500 is fair game. And it looks good. Solana's got some room too, all the way down to 106 bucks. So when it comes to Solana, in this case, the last high was a swing high, and I don't like this look on Solana. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't like this for Solana because this paints a setup to me like it's going to go into a macro consolidation, because the last high wasn't even, it was technically just a swing high. It was a consolidation and then moved down. Not saying that it can, and it's inherently bearish, but in terms of like candle structure, I don't care for this one because the last true closing high is all the way up here at 252 with that higher high. So this was a lower high with a higher high swing, just like everything else, basically 252 all the way up to that 295. So big zone overhead. And yeah, I'm going to say that, yeah, you're not even getting high signals off of this swing high. Technically, the swing trend is broken. So we're still looking at everything, higher low, equal low structure, and then try to build from there. But what I really don't like with Solana is that even if it were to break out, it's got to take this out in earnest, and then it's going to have a big retrace, even if it did that, like, which would be crazy, by the way, if it just busted through like 209, 210 and just started running for the highs, and try to take out the close at 252 and maybe even the all-time high. Well, you're looking at probably something massive has happened. That's just a lot, and it would probably have a massive retrace, probably quickly thereafter. So you want to see constructive price action. So whether this is the high or a little bit higher, put in higher low, equal low structure from there. Weekly's got plenty of room to even do that as well, by the way, on a weekly time frame. 106 to like some of the 125 area that we talked about. That's fair game to the downside to go and retest and still try to put in some higher low structure. So I would give it some room, right? Lower first is down there, like right around that 125, 126 area, which is right around the lows. So it could like retest and then boom, try to build some structure from there. That's going to do it for today. Keep an eye on price tomorrow, as we do have, even if it just provides for lower term time frame volatility, we have some pretty important stuff going on. I'm going to get into some of this kind of stuff, in particular, this high yield corporate bond stuff on Wednesday, just as a check-in, the reclaim on Dixie, and how we're getting some of the sell-off in the 7 to 10 and the 20-year in terms of bonds. Now, we are seeing them kind of move back down in the after-hour session, but in terms of yield, which means that we had selling of U.S. Treasuries, we had, in this case, buying of corporate high-yield bonds. So this is risk on. So coming out of this to go risk on is kind of encouraging. We'll see if it can maintain, though. And even traditional markets look pretty good with a nice rally above some key levels that had been rejected from before. But we'll see how it holds up through the rest of the week, and then we'll come back to it later. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe, and of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.